Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Esra Al-Buti. I'm a partner from Ernst & Young. Today, we're gathered here to witness the important role and explore the important role of logistics that they play in enhancing and facilitating the international trade. Logistics is not just a function. It's actually a global commerce. It's connecting producers with customers, and also it's move goods efficiently across border. In today's world, we witness that supply chain became very complex. Therefore, in our session today, we will dive into different areas, key important areas. We will start with the importance of infrastructure investment. We will cover also sustainability, technology, and we will end our discussion with opportunities and challenges ahead. So I would like to welcome you today in our session, Logistics, the heart of the global trade growth. And with me today, I would like to welcome three distinguished leaders. I will start with Mr. Rayyan Al-Bakri, Deputy Minister for Logistics Services at Ministry of Transportation in Saudi Arabia. Mr. Al-Bakri has been a key driver of KSA logistic transformation toward establishing the country as a global logistic hub. Also, we have with us today Mr. Hens. He's a Group CEO of DSV. Mr. Hens assumed the responsibility for development and optimization of the business, digital strategy, IT operation, and continuous strengthening the group's infrastructure and global network. We also have with us today Ms. Angela. She's the Global Sustainability Director in Kearney. Ms. Angela focused on building sustainable, responsible supply chain and adopting circular businesses model, and also making transportation sustainable. So welcome to be with us today in Saudi House.
Thank you so much.
So I will leave the floor for three of you if you would like to introduce yourself and your respective organization, and also if you can give us your view about the role of logistics in advancing economic growth.
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you. So yes, my name's Angela Hultberg. I'm a Global Sustainability Director with Kearney. We're a management consulting firm. I advise companies on how to transition towards a green economy, be more resilient, more effective. It's a big question about logistics. And honestly, I spent all my career in automotive and logistics. It's just the prerequisite, right, for how we've built our communities and society. And it's one that we take for granted. Mm-hmm. But we all know it doesn't take more than one ship going sideways in one canal and the whole global supply chains fall apart. So it's a very delicate system. It's a complex system. It's a system facing change, which also makes it a very exciting place to be, of course, where change happens. But really, I would say that logistics, to some extent, is the main enabler of prosperity and growth for communities across the world.
Very well said, to be very honest. It's very important to people understand logistics because it's very important in our world to connect all the countries and work together. So, Mr. Rayyan? Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here today, especially among distinguished guests. Logistics, trade without logistics, how can it be delivered?
True.
How can it be executed? So logistics actually is the real heart of injecting that flow of movements from a point to a point to enable trade to be cross borders and to have a full clarity on the visibility of having those transactions. Mm-hmm. So within Saudi Arabia, we look at logistics from a perspective of convenience. Mm-hmm. Convenience of the journey of the movements of goods from point A to point B across all modes of transport. And that goes to air, sea, land, road, rail, and warehousing as well. It's a key enabler in the sector of logistics. And I'll keep the rest for the questions.
Definitely. Mr. Hent?
Yes, thank you for having me as well. A privilege to be here. I come from a company called DSV, and my name is Jens Lund. I'm the CEO of the company. We are one of the leading players in the market, and we are also knowing from many of the transactions we've done where we've been consolidating the industry. Actually, logistics industry is a very fragmented industry today. So it means that we have many players that actually design solutions for the same problem. So the industry has to find a way so that we consolidate and basically get efficiencies, because logistics is basically a very interesting industry. As we already talked about, we move all the cargo physically. It's very important, but it's only part of it. All the data connected to movement of the cargo is equally important. And here we have significant work ahead of us, because we are not really able to communicate in a very efficient way and exchange data sort of between the different transport modes, but also between the different companies operating in the market. And then, of course, the last flow that we are involved in from our industry is also, to a certain extent, the financial flow as well. Because sometimes you can't release a letter of credit unless you have the freight documentation in place, etc. So we actually involved our industry in 3 important levels to keep the society basically going. Because if there's no cargo movement, then everything comes to a stop. And I think sometimes because we've just gotten used to that it works, then we tend to forget, and probably we've also not prioritized to really drive the development of our industry from a legislative point of view well enough, or to develop the infrastructure as well. So I think we have a lot of room to improve, and look forward to discuss that with all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Jens. Being in Saudi House, as a Saudi, I'm so proud to start my question with a question to you, Mr. Ryan. We witness the phenomenal achievement and accomplishment that Saudi is achieving at the moment in the logistics sector. So perhaps maybe my question, how could Saudi position itself to become as a global logistic hub, and how that would impact the global trade routes as well?
Well, very, very good question. Saudi itself, with all the developments that are happening in Saudi, starting from the Vision 2030 since 2016-17 so far, it made our job easy and difficult at the same time. Because when you sit in a country where you have clarity in strategies, vision with KPIs, with objectives, and everybody is supposed to execute those objectives in a best optimized, efficient manner. That makes our job a bit difficult, because the standard is high, and then we have to execute those strategies on the best level of standards that actually matches with the vision for beyond 2030. So we need to look at foundations, we need to look at integration, we need to look at collaboration between businesses, between government, between logistics service providers. Logistics is about ecosystem. It's about connectivity itself.
Sure.
So when we look at it, and we, in the Ministry of Transport and Logistics, and similar to many other ministries, by the way, most of our strategies for 2030 is approved and locked with proper budgets to execute as well. But majority of what we do is enable the private sector to come and participate in that growth. Because for us, we set direction. We look at infrastructure, we look at regulations, we look at enhancing the ecosystem for the journey convenience. Hence, who will execute? It's the private sector, it's the public companies that is owned partly by government and partly by private investment fund, and all the rest of the companies that we value and cherish in Saudi Arabia today, and the global world that are opening, that are more open these days towards coming and investing in Saudi. And that takes us to another point, where when you have a clear direction, when you have a clear strategies, to me it's a manual of success. If you are working in a sector, you just open the strategy of that sector. Look at the projects that they need to execute from now until 2030. Match that with what you have as a priority as a company or an investor. From that point, you know exactly where to go, how to start, and how to contribute within that sector. And that is something that we don't see around us a lot. Maybe it's available somewhere, but for us, it's a unique golden opportunity for growth. When we talk about logistics and global trade, there are many aspects that affects global trade from a logistics point of view. And it goes to sustainability, it goes to infrastructure, it goes to the services itself. If you look at Saudi Arabia today, and we faced a lot of obstacles globally in the last couple of years, starting from COVID, then going to the Evergreen, which is a vessel that blocked Suez Canal, if you all remember. And then we have the Red Sea crisis today. What we witnessed is that the business in Saudi was not affected negatively. But the logistics actually is very dynamic sector. Supply chain needs to move. Global trade needs to move. So if today it's blocked somewhere, I have to take another route and do that. Now, when it goes to the sustainability element, which is going to be the Angela topic today, we look at it from time to market elements and the exchange points of the supply chain and products movements. So Saudi today is in the center. Asia, Africa, Europe, and US. Lots of global trade happens between East and West. Majority or many, not majority, many of businesses and global trade flows pass by, does not stop. But why can't they think of, how about considering Saudi Arabia today as an actual hub to stop and create that efficiency for our trade flow? And I'll tell you one reason for it, and then we can continue.
Yeah.
Now, look at Saudi Arabia with the emerging trends and markets and sectors in the country itself. We started on a good mode. We started with 32 million citizens in Saudi Arabia, set of good projects. Today we are all giga projects, expansion of tourism, expansion of entertainment, the Expo, the World Cup, and then we have the exhibitions in between from now until 2030 and beyond. For the exhibitions, and I hope the numbers are correct, but we have around 38 weeks a year full of exhibitions around the kingdom. It means that more than one exhibition minimum is happening per day, except summer because of the heat. So we look at all the rest of the weeks. All that, if it happens, it means more people, more consumables, more business for the storage, warehousing, infrastructure required, specific logistics services required to move and transport delicate equipments and not big containers or just small parcels. So it will be more specialized and niche services that we require to accommodate the growth and plans of Saudi within 2030 that matches with big growth plans of global entities as well. Because when this execution is happening today, it's considering the global growth and appetite to grow as well. Why did I mention that? Because if I am a company that works in consumables, and I consider Saudi as a hub for me, to pass by, to go through a different country, or to open a new market in a different country. I'm changing a status quo today. However, Saudi Arabia, from a population point of view, it has a good increase and good consumption demand. I didn't mention Hajj and Umrah, which is the pilgrimage, and that is a good number that increases, keep flowing. Last year alone, we had 18.5 million people, Muslims, came to Saudi Arabia on the western region, and they move around the kingdom, and they need certain needs. And they are on top of the locals who does pilgrimage. So only those condensed areas that we have, Jeddah, Mecca, Medina, Munawwara, they all have a specific nature of services from a logistics point of view and from a trade point of view, because most of those who come, they are from global countries and they are used to certain products that they consume and they use. Hence, if they open a hub in Saudi Arabia, and that's where Saudi is positioned as a global hub, if they open a hub in Saudi, they have a great local demand that is not similar to certain hubs in certain destinations around the world. And for us, we cater the demand of that trade from the local consumption. And then we can also open a new window for Africa business from Saudi Arabia. And then we can create resilience for those cargo that flows between East, Europe, Africa, and West. And even the rebuilding of the Middle East now. Hopefully things are becoming better, things are becoming more sustainable, and that will require lots of businesses to be done. And DSV is also participating in certain businesses of such as natures within Saudi and globally as well. For the sustainability, when you have time to market hubs, when you have locations that create optimization, efficiency to global trade, that actually is a major element of sustainability as well, plus all the emissions and the carbonization all. Hence, we have all what it takes for global trade to grow and from a logistics enablement point of view. However, from an infrastructure point of view, we are now growing further. To grow further, it has to match with the global trade belief of the flow that it has to pass by as well. Because local demand, global trade, when they come together, you need proper infrastructure to be able to accommodate that global standard. And that is something that we are now encouraging and we are now incentivizing, we are now pushing. So what did we do in the ministry, for example, for this? We created concepts. So we diversified the economy based on sectors. And we took health sector, industrial sector, trade and e-commerce, and we took tourism, we took the projects and construction, because we are in a construction site so far. We will keep constructing until 2030 and beyond for the infrastructure. So when we took all those, and especially the agriculture as well, which is a very interesting element as well, when we look at those sectors, we digested everything that happens today as a status quo. And we looked at the growth that they want to achieve and the efficiency they want to create. From there, we started to create concepts, to create efficiency from a logistics point of view, and to attract niche companies, logistic providers, that actually serves that market with the best standard possible. And that niche is mainly global business. Global logistics service providers that can come with the know-how, works with the locals, and then start to enhance the ecosystem, so we increase the standard. And then all those sectors will be enabled from a logistics point of view, so they can focus on their own core businesses, and they don't have a lot of headaches or issues from a logistics side, because someone was trying to enable them to grow and fulfill their objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Rayan, for this brief of the achievement and happening. Angela, we mentioned in the discussion with Mr. Rayan just now several times sustainability. Sustainability is very important across all sectors, not only logistic. But in logistic now, because in our discussion, what specific sustainable practices that could be used to achieve that growth?
I have so much I want to reflect on from what you say. I'm like, yes, dual supply chain. This is also an enabler of growth, no? The fact that we're seeing now companies setting up dual supply chains, which made no sense even 5 years ago, but with the geopolitical uncertainties, with the vulnerability of supply chains, the trend towards regionalization, we're actually saying it does make sense now. And we'll see a lot of businesses setting up one for West, moving towards the US, and one moving towards China, Middle East. Definitely going to see Middle East become a hub for Africa. And the free trading agreements, of course, also. We just saw UAE and India signing one, which will also just create that growth, right? So when it comes to then building in a sustainable way, that's the beauty of growth, that you get to at least build new. You don't have to rely only on legacy, because it's not going to be enough. And we desperately need investments in the right type of infrastructure, etc. However, I will challenge back the question, because when we talk about what sustainability elements will enable this, we talk about it like sustainability is is something on its own, like it's its own little component in logistics. It is not. It is a way of doing logistics, right? A truck is a truck, regardless of if it's EV or biodiesel or diesel. It is a truck. There's a sustainable way of running it and a not so sustainable way of running it. But a lot of this comes down to the same thing we all want to have, and we spoke earlier, efficiency. The number one sustainable activity, the starting point for all my conversations with clients is efficiency gain. It is very good for the environment. It is very good for cost. It's maximizing the use of resources. How do we make sure to start with eliminating miles driven, basically? And it comes down to the very core elements of logistics. Filling rate, like all the boring stuff, filling rate, consolidation. How do we handle reverse flows? How do we make sure a truck or a cargo ship is never, ever empty, always filled to the brim? That's the first thing we need to do. But then obviously we do need to build infrastructure. If we want to do this in a more resilient, more sustainable way, we need investments. We need some adaptation of the infrastructure we already have. It's under tremendous pressure. We're seeing extreme weather events, heat waves, floods, storms, costing us millions and trillions of dollars in damages. I spoke to another Scandinavian shipper just yesterday, told us about one of the recent storms in the UK shattering a port for 6 weeks. What happens to logistic flows, to supply chains, when ports close down for 6 weeks? Because flows are flexible, but this is an industry that's on demand, just in time. We're at capacity already because it's growing so fast. It's not easy to move the flows of a port for 6 weeks like that. We are literally wrapping bridges in London in tinfoil because they can't withstand the heat waves, because they were not built in a time where we had the type of heat we have today. The same for railways, right? So we have to focus on mitigation. Yes, let's build for more sustainable modes of transport. Let's build for electric vehicles. Let's get those methanol ships moving, even better battery electric ships, someday.
One day.
But we also need to protect what we have. So when we talk about sustainability in logistics, it's not coming from let's do this in a way that we can all feel a little bit better about. It's about understanding the impact climate change is already today having on our logistics. It's disrupting supply chain. It will cost us a lot more to clean up the messes than to prevent them from happening in the first place. So adaptation and mitigation, and make sure that whatever we build is built in a resilient way, because we have to be able to depend on this. Like I said, logistics is a precondition for all growth, all prosperity. We need to move the goods if we're going to have anything at all. So yeah, just want to really emphasize that sustainability is not a nice, it's not an extra, it's not an add-on to logistics. It is core logistics, and it's probably what's impacting logistics the most at the moment.
Thank you so much for sharing this, Angela. And given that logistic contribution approximately 10% of the global GDP, and also the logistic cost account about from 13 to 15% of the total global GDP, what measures can businesses take to optimize logistic expenditure and enhance the overall efficiency of logistic operation to further drive economic growth?
I think if we sit and listen to what is being said here today, I think we need to invest in infrastructure, because we want to consume less resource basically to move the same pallet or whatever cubic meter of cargo that we have. So we have to drive the efficiency up. I think if you look at Saudi Arabia as an example, you have the chance with the domestic demand that is increasing, but you can also leverage that basically on the international flows. Then you need to invest, for example, in port capacity, so that you would say we have an aspiration to be a competitor to Singapore, for example. Then you need basically to have very efficient operations, but you also need then to have very efficient document flows. as well. And of course, there's some ground to cover when it comes to that, some experience that you need to learn. This will then, when you have consolidation hubs, it allows you to get the utilization up. Because consolidation hubs is like when you move cargo, it's like the heart. It pumps round not the blood, but it pumps round the pellets in the system. So in reality, you would also want that for air freight, where you're building up an airline, you want to compete with the other airlines, you want them to be able to leverage all the capacity you have in the belly of these passenger planes. Then again, you need, to build up that capacity in a hub so that you can utilize the capacity. And then basically you can, I'm not saying decarbonize, but at least you can reduce the carbon footprint of the things that you're doing. And it all comes down to efficiency at the end of the day. This is what you then have to think, and you have to think big when you do this. Then when we sit in the transportation industry, we are very fragmented. So when we have completed our merger with Schenker, we'll probably have 6.5% of the global market and be the market leader. This is very fragmented. It's actually quite unusual. So we have to drive, the consolidation, because otherwise we won't be able to leverage these hubs and to exchange the data that is needed to do this consolidation and also drive the efficiency. So I think these are some of the things that we, from an industry perspective, can continue to drive as well from our end, so that we leverage on the requirements that you would have in a place like Saudi Arabia, could also be other places, and also then drive the sustainability agenda. Because I know we are Scandinavians, so we've been driving this agenda for years, but we don't see it as a conflict. We see it as the only way to win. Yeah. At the end of the day, that we consume less resource to produce a certain outcome. So it's embedded in the way that we are set up and the way we operate. So for me, in DSV, for example, sustainability, in the beginning we had, a sustainability set up and tried to get it mobilized. Today we simply consider it a license to operate. So of course we follow up on what is going on, but it's 100% integrated into the business, the way we allocate capital, the way we run the business, and this is also how it should be.
If I can just build on that, what you said about fragmentation, because to add to the complexity, yes, very fragmented market, but also you're not reliant only on the industry, right? We're reliant on other industries as well. The transport industry cannot decarbonize without the energy industry. The private sector cannot decarbonize without the public and government. So the .com.gov collaboration, the industrial sectors collaborating, it's a large ecosystem that sort of needs to harmonize and needs to work together, and it is hard, but it's the only way we'll move from doing projects and launch 20 electric trucks here, 100 electric trucks there, to actually building a sustainable ecosystem of transportation. So it's difficult to have all those stakeholders, peers, but also completely different sectors.
Yeah, but that's the problem, isn't it? That when you run this, then let's say we have to change our operating models, because the economy is different if you have to do it in a sustainable way than if you operate in a classic way. And that's really where we have to collaborate. So let's take, for example, we have Volvo Trucks, we have a collaboration with them where we use EVs for the inbound of them. And they then acknowledge and realize they would like to get some rolling stock out. So we buy them from them. And then they have to accept that it comes with a little bit higher cost as well. Because it's not there, the technology, where it's competitive. It will be. I'm quite sure that we will engineer our way to that. So we have to have another way of then running the business, and not just letting the classic procurement function at the end of the day making the choice. But it has to go, to somewhere else. With a customer like Volvo Trucks, but also in our company, we have to look at it in a different way. And that's sort of different business models, as you say, that have to drive it. Otherwise, it will take much too long to make the change.
But it's also where governments can really play an accelerating role.
Absolutely, but think about it now from what you just mentioned. There is a challenge that I see, because there is a global way we need to change the way we work. That's one. And then there is the adaptation. And then there is the behavior change of accepting that adaptation that comes with a cost. Because today, a company, a global logistics company that wants to go in a better efficient model of logistics enablement, they have to invest. They have to bring EVs, they have to bring automated systems, they have to do digital, many things. Now, when they start to plan to do that, their cost automatically goes higher on the end user, which are the businesses that they deal with. And that put them under pressure that should I go there or should I keep my P&L healthy? And that's a very challenging element. So for governments to sign off and go and push and just say, let's do that. Then we have the companies who will like it because it creates efficiency. On the long run, it's optimized, it's better in cost, it's better in managing and in the flow. But then we go to those beneficiaries at the end of the day. And they are the ones that needs to be adapting that new change, and the behavior of the normal status quo that we used to deal with needs to change as well. And that's very interesting point, by the way, Lilbi. What can we do further? Because now, when I mentioned the part of concepts, when we try to build concepts to change the way how the business of fruits and vegetables, for example, moves, or the consumables moves between cities, we looked at the efficiency that we can create. And we have projects coming soon that is logistics parks at the entrance of cities, especially condensed cities like Riyadh, Jeddah, Dammam in Saudi Arabia. They have on the entry and they have on the exits. Now, we thought of changing the way logistics is being done between cities, and that companies should look at long haul independently, where they can benefit because they will come full, they will go back full. And then within cities, manufacturers, wholesalers that sells beyond their city limits, they go to that park stop and they do cross-docking from a small mode to a bigger mode. So the trucks will have more than one client load, or one client per the way back as a back load, and that goes as efficient for the transportation company. And then if they want to develop that concept of sustainability, they can actually, because it's calculated mileage and it's a stop to stop, and the ecosystem changed to the way that they can actually create an efficient flow from A to B, including all what's happening in between. But that requires behavior change. And that's something maybe we need to look at more often, because we want to develop, we want to achieve, but not all what we want actually can be done.
Yeah. I think that's always hard, to get the change from the industry. And here, there's really only one way that you can move the industry. It is to be more efficient and have a lower cost at the end of the day. And sometimes, you need to incentivize when you start on a journey where you have to invest in it. Then if you say industry has to do it themselves, it goes slower than if we do it together. It might be, that we get access to some infrastructure for a certain period in time, where you don't pay land lease or whatever, and then later on you can pay. So then you help a little bit, we invest a little bit, and then hopefully also the customers, they see the benefit of it, because you have to attract the volume whether you like it or not. The customer, they have a very procurement-driven approach. We just have to acknowledge that. So we have to have the long-term thinking with the one that controls the infrastructure. So either the government and then, of course, the companies that get allocated different pieces of the infrastructure, so that we can then run that and leverage that. If you construct it the way you plan, to have it in very efficient large hubs, then it will over time attract the volume and be the right solution. But short term, you will always have infrastructure that has basically been written off.
Absolutely.
And you compete with that. And that's then where you have to get over that little hill so that you actually get the volume built up on the big platform, and then the other volume will be marginalized. And actually you can take that land back and use it for something more efficient. Because this is also when you look at transportation and infrastructure. Let's say this city here is Dammam. Then we start to build here, or perhaps a little bit further out. What will happen is that at a certain point in time, the city, it will grow in this direction.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Then we actually have to have a plan where perhaps we take this infrastructure in 30, 40, 50 years and move it further out. This is what we need to do. Then we can reallocate this land to some nice housing or just park or whatever you want to use it for. But we have to have this really, and this is where the government comes in, because as industry we can't take that responsibility.
Yeah.
You have to do that. And then we have to say we are in on that plan, and we would actually want, to commit here, and hopefully I'll not be the boss at that time, but somebody else would like to continue that journey. Perhaps you'll not be in the ministry either, but somebody else will then have that journey. And this is the vision that has to be very long for all these things. And we have to be here for the long run. The short-term thinking, it really won't, get us there.
No. So we can summarize the discussion that long thinking for infrastructure, collaboration between government and private, and also efficiency, which lead us to sustainability, all this will add value for the future growth. So I will move the discussion into global e-commerce. So we have seen that global e-commerce logistic market has expanded from 200 billion in 2020 and to 450 billion by 2025. So what key innovation and operational changes you could focus on to meet the growing demand and to efficiently deliver services?
Honestly, and maybe unpopular opinion now that we're in Davos and everyone's talking about AI and technology shifts and everything, we have a lot of what we need. This is not the problem. People were super innovative 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We have probably 80% of what we need to make this shift. What we are lacking is scale and harmonization. We are inefficient. We're, like I said, doing projects rather than looking for systematic change. It becomes expensive for operators, where some companies in logistics, especially in ocean transport, are now buying vessels with 3 technologies. It's batteries, it's methanol, and it's diesel in the same ship. Why? Seems like a waste of money, but because they don't know, right? There's too much uncertainty, so they have to hedge their bets. There's no harmonization, there's no clear direction, right? When it comes to e-commerce specifically, there's also one component has nothing to do with technology that we sometimes underestimate, and it's the role of the consumer. Who is ordering things online? Yeah, it's consumers. Yes. What do consumers expect? Fast deliveries, free deliveries, and free returns. We have taught them to order goods in the most unsustainable way. If I take my former employer, IKEA, as an example, I don't know how many of you have been to IKEA, hopefully all of you, but when you go, you buy everything you need at once. You spend half a day there, you don't want to go back the next weekend, so you buy the candles, you buy the napkins, just in case. If you buy the sofa, you buy your cushions and the blanket, because you don't want to go back, right?
True.
But if you order online, you order the sofa, then you have to think about which cushions do I actually want, what pillows do I want, and you order them 2 days later, and then 3 days later you order the blanket, right? So that's 3 deliveries instead of the one you had. So e-commerce has the opportunity to be more sustainable, but it rarely is, right? And the consumers expect this to be free, but much like lunches, there are no free deliveries. And especially now with everything, Domino's Pizza taught IKEA customers to expect a delivery within 1 hour, right? Amazon has taught customers to expect delivery the next day, no matter from where or what you're buying. I expect it to be in my house next week. Is that reasonable? Is it? No. It's absolutely not, right? And the consumers doesn't know. So there's an educational component there that I think we're underestimating. Technology will not save us all. We have to actually also, remember we are humans and we have behaviors, and those behaviors, to your point, needs to somewhat change. Government needs to teach them. Transport companies need to maybe it's dynamic pricing. Maybe say, yes, you can have it tomorrow. That will cost you 20 euros. If you wait 3 days so I can get my filling rate up, you get it for 5. And that's how companies can work with changing behaviors. Don't have to talk about sustainability. Don't even have to mention. It's just about efficiency gains and what that means for you as a customer. But we have to start changing a little bit how the customer view transportation. Because the big conflict that we haven't touched on, but it's really at the heart of the problem, is who's going to pay for the technology shift here? Who's going to pay? Because the consumers are not willing to pay extra. I'm not willing to pay extra for a dress to make sure it's not manufactured by children. I assume from the companies I give my business to, they don't use child labor. Why should that be a premium? That should just be a given. The same thing we now see for sustainable transport. And consumers saying, why should I pay you extra not to pollute the air and give me lung cancer? That should just be the status quo. And then so if we cannot push the cost of the technology shift down the supply chain all the way to the end customer, then what? Then, is someone gonna be stuck? It's like playing hot potato, right? Nobody wants to get stuck with it. So it will require increased collaboration, a bit of trust and openness, a bit of support from governments to make sure that we're all sharing the investment. I don't want to say cost, because I truly believe mid to long term, it will be a reduction of cost. It will. Electric vehicles are cheaper to own, operate, maintenance, fuels. It will be cheaper. But who's going to get stuck with that cost, and how do we share it? So yes, technology can do a lot for us. It really can. Like you said, the data is so important. But human behavior, trust, so we can collaborate in the most efficient way to change it. These are the core foundations that we need to really rely on to make this change happen.
This is very insightful, to be honest, because I order a lot online. So it's good to understand this. So my next question to you, Hans. Approximately 80% of global trade value is transport by sea. So what strategies can shipping industry implement to build resilience against disruption, such as global pandemic, which happened recently with us, also natural disaster, as mentioned by Mr. Ryan earlier, happened in the Middle East and in Saudi as well. So how we can ensure continuous supply chain operations?
I think it goes very much down to data, but I would just want to say one thing about what you're saying about how we consume resource. Today, it's a free lunch. It doesn't cost anything to emit CO2. So if you put a price on that, that goes back to the transportation mode. The faster you want to move things, the more you emit. So in reality, the governments, they play a role in that. And it can't be done in Sweden or in Denmark. We have to have a global solution for that. Then I think we would have the dynamic pricing that we are talking about, and that will then over time drive the behavior. And then the funds that you collect, they should be allocated so that we can invest in the new technology. I think that's a very good way to look at it. So the resource allocation, it always works, in my view. Then back to transportation, what can companies do? I think many companies today, they have very fragmented infrastructure within the company. So they don't have an overview of their own supply chain. So this means that I actually might have 4 different brands that, let's say, produce perfume. I would need the same pump, but I have 4 different supply chains, and I don't know basically what I have in store because I don't have any visibility on it. So I might think I'm low on one of the brands, but in reality I could collect it from the other brand. But now I go to the manufacturer and I want it express because I'm in a big need. So I might even do air freight to get it there quickly. And this is not needed. It's actually not very clever. But since I don't know it is actually the right decision to take, but it's the wrong decision. If you had the right information, you would never do it. So in reality, what I'm talking about is to have an overview over your data. And what we find is that many industries, also within our sector, so it's a global problem. It's not only our customers, it's certainly also within transportation. It's so fragmented on the data. So people, they will make the right choice if they have the right information. I always believe that people, they really make the right choice. But if they don't know, they can't take an informed decision. So I think we have to do much more work on the data and make sure that we have the ability to make the informed decisions. This will then allow us to increase the volume that we ship on water that has less carbon footprint, and perhaps reduce the use of other means of transportation at the end of the day. I think this is at least what we try to advise our customers. We have great success with something like PO management, overview of the purchase orders of the customer, hook up to what they have in inventory, and then try to give them a dashboard where they can have a look at, what should I do in this situation? Do I need to ship fast, or do I actually have some cargo in storage? We operate here in Saudi Arabia, also, for example, on a NEOM project where we try not to replicate the supply chains. It's an audacious project, as you know, and then in order to, you can actually have EPCs that work on this project, on this project, on this project. They will have their own supply chain.
Absolutely.
What has been done, which is very unusual in NEOM and also very audacious, is to try to consolidate these supply chains so that we have, this is also another way to decarbonize, but it's also a way to get more security on the construction side and also to lower the cost. So it's this dynamic where you get more insights, but also perhaps where we then do things in a slightly different way than we've done before.
Yeah.
And this then has to come with different kind of business models so that we basically, to the benefit of all, deliver a better service and then with less resource consumption.
If I may reflect on that last point, for the consolidation, we did an analysis in the last 3 months on the project cargo, construction projects, and how logistics actually can enable that sector. So we sat with a construction company that had a project for 1 billion riyals to be conducted. The logistics cost, based on the lump sum fees they got from the contractors, was 24% out of the total cost, which is huge. We brought a logistics company that does construction logistics. And we gave them that file in collaboration with that company just to do that business case. After 2 months of studies, they came back and they reduced that cost to 8.2%.
Wow.
And they mentioned that we did that and we are still very high in net profits. Hence, consolidation of such mega and giga projects from a supply chain logistics point of view makes a big difference in efficiency. But again, as mentioned, we need to look at how we manage those things, how we change the behavior of doing our own business. We are used to a status quo way of doing business for sustainability consistency. But sometimes we need to look at different options to create value for our sector.
Thank you so much for this insight. Unfortunately, we have limited time, but there is a lot of things we could cover. So if I can leave, I have 2 minutes, I can leave quickly for 3 of you. If you can give us your thoughts about the next 5 years, what could be enhancing logistics and increasing global trade from an opportunity and challenges point of view? If you can focus on opportunity and challenges.
Okay, if I may. I believe the most important element is to be proactive, to be good at predicting. We need to predict the trends, predict the flow, predict how global trade is moving, the changes that are happening today with the geopolitical tensions, the changes that are happening today with markets that are open to each other, that didn't used to be open to each other any before. All this needs to have an eye from a government point of view and business point of view, where we identify the right regulations that needs to be changed, developed, enhanced, removed, or the right policy to be executed, and at the same time to enable all the stakeholders within the ecosystem, name regulators, name business owners, name infrastructure. We have to enable and facilitate that growth from whatever we can do to do within a government point of view. Now, what does that mean? It means opportunities for businesses and opportunities for sectors to grow as well, knowing that someone is looking at those things from the logistics backbone of the ecosystem that we have.
Thank you so much for ending this with very insightful information. I would like to thank all our panelists for this knowledge and insightful information they shared with us today. And thank you all of you for attending this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.